I'd like to call this working meeting of the Lincoln County Board of Education for the month of August to order. You see the meeting agenda in front of you. Is there any discussion about the agenda? If not, I'll entertain a motion to accept the agenda as presented. Motion. Ricky's motion.
Second.
Gloria second. Vote. Gloria.
Yes.
Etta.
Yes.
Bruce. Yes. Ricky. Yes, sir. I vote yes also. Discussion items 3A, our bonding capacity update. Mr. Pine.
Pleasure to be here tonight. I've got Wendell Emerson with me as well. At the expense of kind of being redundant, some of you have kind of heard my spiel before, and I like to break things down when it comes to bonding capacity and present things in a manner that we can all relate to, just as if you were trying to take out a home mortgage. You're going to walk into your local bank to see how large of a house you can build. When you do that, of course, your banker is going to want to know what your current debts are and your sources of revenue. So on this handout, if you all will turn to page 1, each column on page 1 represents the principal plus interest payments on outstanding debt obligations that are currently on your books. And so if you jump all the way to the far right-hand column G, you'll see that each fiscal year for approximately the next 10 or 12 years, the sum of all of your outstanding bond payments are approximately $1.5 million. And as we look farther down that column, you pay off some debt, that number starts to decrease. On the surface, that's a really large number. Oh my gosh, how do we pay for it? Let alone have any left over to consider another project. But if you'll turn to page 2, we'll identify the sources of revenue that you've got to make those payments. Most familiar, column B, your local nickel. This is simply 5 cents per $100 of assessed property value. Here in Lincoln County, that generates $668,893 per year. Now, I'm conservative by nature. Let me just go ahead and say that. And this year, especially the last couple of years, there's all the more reason to be conservative when I present what your maximum ability to borrow is. One of those, the funding formula, is driven in large part from your average daily attendance. Without a crystal ball, none of us know how many students are going to come back. We know what the trend was going into COVID. I'm going to point out a few ways that I've been very conservative, because who really knows? One of these ways that we're conservative is, as we look at column B, your assessed property values. We don't project any growth in that over the next 20 years. Of course, there will be growth. A school building bond issue is different from a mortgage in that the term is for a 20-year term versus a 30-year mortgage. So as you look down column B, we keep that revenue number the same. Again, just as a way to be conservative, we do anticipate that your property values are going to increase, generating more revenue, but this snapshot in time, we're just going to keep it there. Column C, an additional nickel. Some districts levy an additional 5 cent equivalent, which would generate an additional $668,000 per year of revenue. Column D, your capital outlay funds. This formula hasn't changed in 25 years. It's simply $100 per unit of average daily attendance. Here in Lincoln County, the department requires us to only use 80% of that number. There's some competitors of mine out there that would come to you and not be as conservative. KD has to put some guardrails on those folks and says, well, whenever you run a bonding capacity calculation, only use 80% of capital outlay, not 100%. So another way we're being conservative, only using 80% of capital outlay, which here generates $266,784. Column E, nickel equalization. Campbell County I use as an example. They have such a heavy industrial tax base. So much of their funding comes from that local property tax. The object of this equalization, FSPK column E, is to provide your population with total funding that equals 150% of the statewide per pupil assessed property. If you took the assessed property value of the entire state, divided it by the number of students, multiplied by 150. That's the goal of this column F within the SEEK formula, is to equalize your district, even though you may have less, some more depressed property values than a Campbell County and Kenton County. Your students, when it comes to facilities, are going to receive a similar per pupil amount of funding. Column G, total revenue available, $1,794,000. If I back out column H, which is the debt that's currently on the books, I'm left with column I. This is in essence what you're walking into your local bank saying, this is my free and clear available revenue over the next 20 years that I've got available. Column I. In addition to that, and something that I want to mention importantly today, every 2 years you receive an offer of assistance from the School Facilities Construction Commission. Separate agency, the General Assembly, typically it's somewhere between $60 and $100 million. The General Assembly hands out this money to the School Facilities Construction Commission. The SFCC, they look at your district facility plan. They look at the bottom line number, which is the unmet need. When you do a facility plan, you list as much of your need as you can justify. Well, the School Facilities Construction Commission basically takes an Excel spreadsheet, they put in the unmet need of every district in the state, assign a ratio to it, you get your piece of the pie of the what was $100 million that the General Assembly gives to the SFCC. They hand out offers of assistance based on your pro rata portion of need. That's why when you do a new DFP, it's always, even though you may not have the bonding potential to do everything that you would like to do, as much as you can identify on that plan will help when it comes to receiving offers of assistance. Specifically, column J, the 2012 offer of assistance. The SFCC said, we're going to give you $29,279 per year for a period of 20 years towards bond payments. But you have to issue those bonds before, in this case, January 30th of 2022. So column J will expire and go away unless bonds are issued to utilize them before January 30th, 2022. That revenue stream in column J, again, it comes directly from the SFCC. It's not your dollars. It's not dollars that ever cross your district. It will bond approximately $390,000, $400,000, depending on interest rates. So that's why we need to be considering a project to utilize that money. Otherwise, it does just disappear. I move all the way over to the far right-hand column.
May I ask a question there?
Yep.
So the board would need to take action at what time to make sure we would encumber those funds and not lose them?
To be honest, it is at this point probably an as soon as possible situation.
Because we're told that our district facility plan will not be on the Kentucky Board of Education agenda until October.
I would probably, because it really truly is a use it or lose it scenario, I would suggest picking almost a roof, something to use it from your old plan, getting a BG1 going, because it's not going to be as easy as just starting a BG and obligating it. It actually has to, and I think it's going to be looked upon favorably at KD. I think they'll try to push. They know this deadline is coming. Their normal bureaucratic operations.
They told us that the log jam of district facility plans is like never before.
Yeah.
It's just as quick as they can get them.
And even if it wasn't a facility plan issue, if it was just a BG that you sent up for a normal project during normal times, it's a slow process. I think they'll expedite it, but I would try to pick a project as soon as possible and get a BG up there. What I have to come back to you with, so that $390,000 of bonding there may be some cash on your books that the SFCC previously required to be escrowed and set aside. that's tied specifically to those dollars. And they said, hey, because you had these dollars left over in whatever particular year in the past, they said, before you use our offer of assistance, you also have to apply cash to that project. So if you designed only a $390,000 project, it would turn out you do have some cash that I got to research and come back to you. You got to design a project that's going to be a little bit larger than 390,000. Otherwise, we end up letting some of that free bonding money not get used. So kind of two things. We've got the $390,000 minimum bond issue we need to be looking at to satisfy column J. But if you go to the far right-hand column N on page 2, that's the revenue stream inclusive of the SFCC offers that you're sitting down with your banker saying, this is what I got. If I really wanted to max things out, what could I do? And so if you turn to page 3, column C, I've modeled a hypothetical $8 million bond issue and kind of shown what the principal amounts would be in column C. Column D are the interest rates. These are very conservative interest rates because a project, an $8 million project, if you started contemplating such, by the time you designed it, it made its way through KDE, it would be 10 months to a year. What I always have to avoid would be a situation where a year from now, interest rates in the market skyrocketed. You've brought in an architect and designed this big project, and then you have to bring me back in and say, well, I'm sorry, I hadn't allowed for interest rates to increase, and so you don't really have $8 million. So that's why I've been very conservative in my interest rate assumptions. That's where a competitor might come in and tell you you've got $10 million. They might not necessarily be wrong, just not as conservative. If you did an $8 million issue, far right-hand column K, this year, as far as I know, this year only, kindergarten is being included in your ADA. And from a funding perspective, I'm not comfortable issuing bonds for a 20-year period until I know for sure that that's going to be a permanent fixture. So in column K, this is the amount that would be left over if you issued an $8 million project. You'll see the first 10 years or so, I've backed out about $120,000. That is to allow for some fluctuation in ADA for the kindergarten money to disappear. Hopefully it becomes permanent. But just another way that I've been conservative in the $8 million estimate. In summary on page 4, I'm going to have trouble with this math, but if you add up the 4 offers of assistance from the SFCC, what we got? 1.5 to $2 million. You could look. You don't have to target only a $390,000 project to use the 2012 SFCC offer. If you were trying to do a project that utilized only the SFCC's money and none of your local money, technically you could look at it 1.5 to $2 million, whatever some of those 4 SFCC offers are. But it's only the first 2012 SFCC offer that is set to expire. The others could be. It's going to be January 2024 before the 2014 offer of $670,000 expires. No, that was a lot. Questions?
I looked on page 2 for the year 2022. All the figures in columns J through M are a little bit off if compared. Is there a reason there?
That is a good question. Yes. So that is because I'm presenting your bonding potential as if you issued those bonds today, and we're in the back half of the year. So if you issued bonds literally tomorrow, in fiscal year 22, you would only have an interest-only payment, not principal plus interest. That's why the sum of the first number and the sum of the very last number on the column equals 29,279. That's a very good catch. SFCC said we'll pay you 29,279 per year, but they break the sum of the first and the sum of the last. Yeah, good catch. Also, the document you've seen us signing, we did successfully sell your refinancing bonds, locked in 161,000, I believe, by refinancing your Series 2012 issue. Looking at your outstanding debt, we're always going to be monitoring it, but it's going to be a long time before you really don't have anything else. You're in a good spot. You've refinanced about everything that you can. Rates are down to be considering any kind of a project. Any questions? Leanne knows how to get a hold of me anytime. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else along those lines? Moving on, 3B, the Kings Mountain property, Ashley Powell.
I was just following back up with you guys. Last time I was here, I inquired about property at Kings Mountain location. So I was just kind of curious where we were at with that. You guys have had a chance to look into that.
You want to talk to them about what we're waiting on?
Well, I have contacted Doug Gooch with HE Engineering to get a clean survey. And of course, he's covered up like everybody else with all the price. I've not got that back yet. But other than that, that's really all I've done since then.
You're still interested?
Absolutely.
Do you know exactly what size where you have acreage was?
I think an acre would be good. I think we could consider if you all need to give us a little less than that in pricing wise or whatever, then that's acceptable to look at. But I think somewhere around an acre would be ideal.
And you were thinking, the last time you were thinking on the 1247 side, or you thinking the 27 side?
Well, I think if we look at the 27 side, the only thing we have to look at is egress.
Right.
State highway department, so forth. So I think we're open to whatever worked out best. But yeah, initially I looked at the 1247 side just because of the egress.
I'm sorry, Ed.
No, go ahead.
Along with the getting it surveyed, we're also in the process of getting it appraised too, because we've not done that.
Right.
And it's, again, taking a little longer than normal to
Yes,
get that.
Those dudes are covered up.
I understand.
Would it be a fair statement though to say that we are optimistic about it?
Yes.
So.
That's good.
Thank you for coming.
Oh, no worries. Just keep me.
You keep us updated every 4 or 5 months.
Sounds good.
Please.
I will do it.
We'll be in contact with you as soon as we start getting.
Yeah, I was gonna say, we can get
Sounds
back
good.
with you when we
Yeah.
start getting some stuff back.
Sounds great. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, tax rates, Leanne Smith.
That's the topic everybody loves. I have some talking notes, I think, attached there that I'm going to kind of read through. Try to put things in as simple a language as I can, just so I can understand it and maybe help other people to understand. So I'll just read through that. Last year, we set the tax rate at 53.95. That was for both real and personal property. Breakdown, total revenue that we received was a little over $6 million, and that breakdown would be 4.7 million property, about 1.2 million for franchise, and $146,000 delinquent tax. Every year you have basically 2 options. You can set a compensating rate, which is a rate that is calculated to give you comparable revenues to what we received last year, or you can take the 4% revenue increase, which means that we would bring in 4% more revenue than we brought in last year. The KDE calculates all that. They take the assessment and all that and plug in a bunch of formulas, and then they send out the information to us to tell us what those rates would be. The compensating rate for the coming year for real estate would be 50.7, and the compensating rate for personal property would be 54. And the compensating rate would generate estimated revenue of $6,219,696. As you can see, that compensating rate is much lower than the rate that we set last year. Assessments for our county are way up, a lot higher, a lot bigger increase this past year than in previous years. So if you're looking at the same revenue as last year, if your assessments are going way up, then obviously your rate is going to have to go down to get that same output with the revenue. So that would be the compensating rate. Then your other option is your 4% revenue increase rate. So basically that looks at, here's what the compensating rate would be. Now we're going to take this times 4% to give your revenue increase for this year. Now, this year's a little bit of an anomaly because the assessments increased so very much. Actually, to get a 4% revenue increase, our property tax rate would still be lower than last year's rate. So the 4% revenue increase rate for real estate would be 53.2, and that's including exonerations. So compare that to last year's rate of 53.95. So the rate would be 53.2. The rate, the 4% revenue increase rate for personal property would be 54.8, and that's including exonerations also. If the 4% increase was taken, it would generate $6,480,937. So the difference between taking the compensating rate and the 4% revenue increase would be $261,000. My recommendation would be to take the 4% revenue increase. I think it's kind of a win-win in that it's going to bring in more revenue for us, but it's also going to be a decreased property tax rate. We would bring in a little over $400,000 more dollars this year compared to last year with a tax decrease on that property rate. The motor vehicle tax rate remains constant. That is 54.2. Just for your information, last full year we collected $1,063,884. Our utility tax rate is 3, and last year we took in $1,066,448. If the board is interested in pursuing the 4% revenue increase, we do have to have a public hearing. So if you guys want to discuss that, and let me know, and if you are interested, we advertise and then we'll have a public hearing so that, you know, people can state their opinion if they so choose, and then we would decide on the rate at our next board meeting. So I know also one thing that I've seen you all discuss, we discussed salaries. And I know that we are interested in making Lincoln County competitive with our salaries that we pay all our employees. And my thought is if we are wanting to do that, if that's something the board's wanting to do, that taking that 4% revenue increase is pretty vital. If you want to give raises, then the 4% revenue increase is one way to ensure that we have enough money to cover that from year to year.
Question?
I do. Leanne, can there be an option between those two? I look back at last year's and there was one midway.
That's not typical, honestly, but yes, it can be done. Last year, I think we took 2%, a 2% increase. The typical, what the state always prepares and sends out is the compensating rate and the 4% increase. Anything greater than the 4% is subject to recall. 4% is the maximum you can increase the revenue and not have that subject to recall.
So if we took the 4% on personal property, we're basically increasing about 0.9, right?
If you took the 4% on,
Personal property,
yeah, and
about a 0.9% increase.
it is a little bit of an increase. The personal property brings in quite a bit less. That's more. Of course, your real estate is your land, your homes, what most of us pay. Your personal property is going to be more tangible, more, from my understanding, your businesses, your tangible tax, their inventory, their assets, they pay an amount on that every year, and that's what that rate would be applied to. Most people, myself, when I think of the taxes I pay, that would be the property tax rate.
And the 4% on the real estate, it's about 0.75 less, right?
Less,
than-
correct. Mhm. I looked back, the past couple of years, the assessments have increased maybe between 25 and $35 million each year, and the increase this year was between 80 and 90 million.
Yeah, one thing that I've reached out and I've talked to Ms. Smith about is we also have the capability to tax watercraft. The district has not done that. And I contacted the state. They're the one who lists the value of the autos and sets the rates and stuff. And they said that my understanding was that there was no watercraft in Lincoln County, or that they were including it with auto. I do know there's a watercraft in Lincoln County. I see that. So we're reaching out to see what that would be, what it would generate, and we'd like to share that with the board for y'all to decide whether you want to do something like that or not. But it's something the board has not done in the past.
Part of the point is just because we don't have lakes, we do have boats that get licensed within this county. We just like licensing cars. And we have tax budget. Any other questions, comments? Okay. 3D, data security and breach notification, Mr. Yaden.
That's a required each year by the state. It's just a FYI that we're supposed to get out there. The board's supposed to just look over it by August 30th. And if you got any questions, we will pursue those. But it's I don't think it's changed the last couple of years, that information that you got in front of you. There's no action needed or anything like that.
Any questions or comments? Okay. 3E, the 2021-2022 District Emergency Operation Plans, Mr. Krager.
I sent out, to go through the whole thing as quickly as possible. When I first came into this role, I sent the emergency operations plan to Kentucky Center for Safe Schools and asked for a look and for them to give us any advice, things we needed to change, things we needed to add, so on and so forth. And I got good feedback from them. I then shared the plan with all the building level principals, go through and see what you see that has changed since last year, everything down to, we always have changes in staffing. So some of the people listed as contacts within there would have to be changed, phone numbers changed, all that kind of stuff. Shared it with Mr. Yaden and Mr. Rowe. We discussed a couple of items as well, and I discussed it with Don Gillum, Lincoln County Emergency Management, and he and I discussed. We did as much front end work as we could. Then we met on July 20th. First responders here in this room went through, discussed, and looked at anything else, final edits, and approved it with all those folks that everybody was good with what was within it. And then I made those changes that came up that day and shared it back out again, waiting for approval tonight. And you all should have it, I guess, Colleen put it in there. And then once you all approve, the schools will take it to their councils and share with their staff before beginning the school.
Any questions or comments?
Yes.
Go ahead.
What's the procedure like for monitoring the various things within the plan?
What's
Like the different drills that's required?
well,
Because I know,
because there's a lot of pieces to it, you know that. I mean, you used to lead the sharing of the plan with the first responders. The drills would come to me, each month, and up front, everybody knows how many they have to do, when they have to do them. And if I've not gotten them, let's get close to the end of the month, I have weekly reminders set for myself to remind folks, you haven't completed this one yet or whatever. And they come to me, I control those, I keep up with those. And then in eProve, which Ms. Tomlinson heads, there's a report in there of safety that you have to say that you completed all your drills. And I believe there's a portion in there as well, because I've never done it on that end, but I know I'm asked for it every year. When did your council approve it? When did you share it with your staff? So I've already asked principals for that, to make sure when you do those things, let me know, which most of them are doing it the day before opening day or right in there somewhere.
The reason I asked that is because you recall a few years ago, the board got in trouble because they weren't monitoring that. So that was just my question. Because we started doing a report to the board
Right.
about that to ensure.
Right.
So is that something like if we have
Is that
another
something we
review
want
or
to do quarterly
something?
or?
Is that something that we need to ensure that we're
I know
doing?
the what I report on is for the school report card. So it goes live, at a certain date, and it has all that information there for folks to look at. But I do remember that, Bruce, that we were doing that.
But that, I mean, if that's something the board wants, that would be easy to share.
Right.
Yeah.
I just want to ensure that we're doing what we need to be doing as a board.
You had the forms for some time to keep track of all the drills and everything, hand it in.
It would just be a matter
On a
of me
monthly
sharing.
basis.
What's
Is
that?
that a monthly basis?
They're done, well, at least Fire Grove is done every month.
Right.
But then, you have your others at the start of school and, after the winter break, you have more again, pretty much everything except for bomb threat, which you do at the beginning of school, you repeat them all again come January.
Mhm.
So whenever you want to set as dates for me to share that with you, I mean, I can do that.
We'll talk about that. All right. Anyone else? All right. 3F, buses for surplus, also Mr. Krager.
We have, I've shared with Ms. Smith, dealt with mechanics. We've looked at our buses that are out of depreciation. And I talked with, as I said, Ms. Smith about this, and it's my first time around doing this, so making sure that we didn't miss any steps. Pretty sure we've got everything in order now, but you have the bus numbers, 0403, 0404, 0405, 0501, with those first two numbers being an indicator of how old the buses are. They're well out of depreciation, and we have individual sheets to where, we've documented their condition, how many miles are on them, and it ranges anywhere from 185,000 to 200 and almost 80,000 on some of them. And so it's time for those to move on to greener pastures.
Questions, comments? 3G, bus purchases, Mr. Krager and Ms. Smith.
I'll go
You
first.
might want to leave that.
I'll go first. We are looking to purchase 2 special needs buses. I'll let Mr. Krager give more specific information on those, but we do have some IDEA money that we can use to purchase these buses. I think the cost of each is around $120,000. There are some quotes attached there. You want to give any breakdown on those?
On the actual cost.
I
But
don't know.
The buses we're getting, they ended up being, there's 2, it's 117,000 per bus. They are air conditioned. They do have the latest cameras. They actually even have basically they have 360 cameras. So they're a lot safer because there are blind spots, that some of our cameras don't pick up. And they have LED headlights, which is an upgrade. We have them fully outfitted with as many seats as we could get in it, even in front of the wheelchair lifts, because those, we could utilize those in different ways. We could take those seats out. They're both Thomas buses, and we have other buses that are, well, most of our buses are out of Thomas for internationals. So those seats can be used in others if we used to need to use one of those base as things change. So we had it fully outfitted with as many seats as we could get in it. So it'd be a 52 passenger.
Questions, comments? 3H, Family Health and Disabilities Manager, Randy Hahn.
This is not an additional position. This is the position that you all previously approved for our program. I'm coming back to you to ask, we had, on that original job description, we had listed administrative certification as a preferred skill for that position. In doing so, when we hired that position, that was not good enough for EPSB to allow that person who has administrative certification to utilize that certification and start their certificate, because that's on a 5-year deal. You have to start, you have to use your principal certification within 5 years. So I'm asking for you guys to change that job description to put administration required so that that person can go ahead and start using their administrative certification with this position. With that being said, I'm asking for 10 additional days to line them up with the other administrators in our program. And that would all be covered under this particular position is actually paid out of our state preschool funds and our IDEA preschool funds. This is the position that's kind of like our instructional coaches, but also our EC leads, but they particularly cover all the students in the preschool program throughout the whole district. They have a very complicated job because we have Care Preschool and we're a blended program. So between Head Start, the First Steps program and Care Preschool, they have a very tedious job. So just asking for those 10 additional days. We have the money to cover that, and then to add the administrative certification as a requirement for that position. That also helps us too, because somebody has to be a site supervisor when I'm not on site. And we do have that covered by our principals in our other buildings. But they get very overwhelmed at Stanford, and because the daycare is actually at Stanford and we're a licensed childcare facility, there's a little more requirement there of what the expertise needs to be. So kind of helps cover that daycare end of that and not just the preschool.
Questions, comments?
So what percentage of your budget's now in salary?
We're around that portion is not coming out of our Head Start. So that's not counted in our Head Start budget at all. And we have plenty of funds in there to cover that for the IDEA preschool, because we only pay for Wilderness Trace and this position out of that. So it's not part of our Head Start at all.
How many positions were lost in the early childhood program when the task force did the review a year or so ago?
1, 2, 3 positions we lost.
So I guess this is a question maybe for Jonathan. When we're changing these positions after the original posting, what does that, because there's some others on the agenda here. How does that?
I can look at that. I would say if it's at the request of EPSB, that would probably be a requirement on it. But I can look at that and see what the requirements would be.
That was an EPSB suggestion when we called them to see what we needed to do, because we asked for it to have preference as an administrative. We just didn't say it was required.
There's a few more like later on the agenda of changing. Some are already, positions. So I'm just curious how all these changes after the fact.
Well, and most of our changes have happened to better line us up with the program standards. Most of the position we had, most of the people in the position in the program that have left have been there for quite some time, so they really hadn't been reviewed. And so it just is aligning us up better. So really this one coming back with administrative is kind of hindsight 2020 after I've learned the program a little bit more and what's required. I feel like that's going to be beneficial, especially for the daycare end of our licensing and that sort of thing.
Anything else? 3I, 21st Century Director position, Ms. Hart.
Yes, so when we attained a program at all 7 schools for 21st Century, we expanded and added another 21st Century director. So we've had 2 for the past couple of years. We had one leave in early May. And during that time, there was so much going on. It was the largest summer school initiative that we've ever had. And it was just, there was no time to train someone new. So we carried on with one and have done very well this summer, and things have gone really well. So in speaking with Leslie Spears, who is our KDE representative for 21st Century, and just kind of shooting some ideas back and forth, I really feel like having one is sufficient for our district. However, that person has taken on 3 extra schools and a lot more responsibilities and a lot more time and energy. So it's perfectly fine with 21st Century and our grant if we don't fill that other position. What I'm proposing to you is a stipend to compensate this person. However, I did feel like it should be tied, because if we lost a grant, I don't feel like, the stipend should stay the same. So what I'm asking you to do is create a $2,000 stipend per school. And that's not only compensating this person for their time, but also an incentive to keep the grants at all the schools so that, we still have it available to all our students in our district, which is a rare find. And it's an amazing opportunity for our kiddos and our teachers and everybody. So not changing anything other than adding a stipend to this position.
And that stipend will be taken care of by the funds saved by eliminating the director
Which is
position.
perfectly fine. I worked with Leanne to look at our grants. I also spoke with Leslie about that, and that is perfectly acceptable to do. And it's gonna save our district money, which will go back to the kids.
Question?
So I guess that kind of like amending the original grant.
Yes,
Just less.
yep. Mhm. Yes, sir.
Anyone else? All right. 3J, MOA with Midway University, Mr. Rowe.
This is the annual discussion of Midway University providing student teachers to Lincoln County. We like for them coming in. There's a chance maybe we can recruit a couple of those to stay with us. So it's the same thing we do every year. And at our regular meeting, my recommendation would be to approve the MOA with Midway.
Questions? All right. MOA with Murray State, Mr. Rowe.
Yes, even though Murray State's pretty far away from us, we do have some employees who have completed counseling degrees through Murray State. And part of that is they need to do some clinical hours. And this MOA allows them to do clinical hours in our district. It doesn't cost us anything, but it's the legality part of it, and we've done that in the past.
Questions? Okay. COVID-19 emergency days, Mr. Rowe. 3A.
Yeah, originally had this on the agenda before I realized that the local superintendent advisory council and the Kentucky Board of Education was actually discussing the same exact thing. Last year, the board approved for those who were vaccinated when it expired about, originally we were allowed to give unlimited COVID days or emergency days for those who were quarantined. Then that expired. And as the board, we came back after legal advice from Jim Crawford through KEDC, is that we could do the same thing for those who were vaccinated when that expired. So what I would like the board to consider is to do the same thing we did the last time the board approved this, is for those who have been vaccinated, if you are quarantined by a doctor, by the district or local health department, you would not have to use your sick days for that. And then we would grant them emergency days. I don't know exactly what happened at the Kentucky Board of Education meeting today because it wasn't live. They set it up after the meeting was over. And this may have already been approved by the Kentucky Board of Education, which would take it out of the hands of us. But if not, I would still like to discuss this at our next meeting for possible approval.
And the cost would be absorbed by the district.
Yeah, the cost would be absorbed by the district. The funds for that could either come from the general fund or ESSER funds.
Question or comment?
I want to make a comment. The board doesn't decide vaccinated. Unvaccinated. You have to be vaccinated to get this.
That's
This
only
is not a
information.
board decision. I want the general public to know.
Yeah.
That
This
I'm
is
not
coming saying
saying
this is
you
what-
have to get
yep.
this shot. We're not saying. The state said this.
Anyone else? 3M supervision hours for MHS and CSW, Mr. Rowe.
Yeah, this is one of Miss Cooper had submitted, and I told her I would cover for it. If I haven't told you all, she was actually out of state helping her daughter move. What we have is we have two employees that, wrong paper here. Two employees, I'll give you the names here. It is mental health specialist Rachel McChrystal and our CSW Megan Brown. Currently, they're not able to bill for their services. What this is asking that the board would pay for their supervision hours. And once they got the supervision hours done, they could bill for the district. As part of that, they would sign a 5-year contract stating they would not leave, or they sign a contract saying if they left within 5 years, they would have to pay back all those funds that were used for them to use supervision. We think within a couple of years, once this is paid, we'll start making profit for the district. And the most important thing is we're providing services to kids that we're currently not able to reach, or for kids who are unable to be transported by their parents to an outside agency for some mental health services.
And just an FYI, Rachel is already halfway finished with her supervision. She started that before she ever became employed here, so she's pretty close to being done. She already has that set up and she's working on it.
All right. I noticed ESSER funds are being used. We have it thinking about how we could sustain this afterward.
If they stay here, then they will supervise new people and we won't have to pay anything. It'll just be part of their job.
Anyone else? Okay. 3N, mask recommendation, Mr. Rowe.
This has been, no matter when going around town the last couple of weeks, this has been the topic of conversation. I guess I want to let the board have some conversations on here about masks. I do want to let you know, I've been trying to keep tally of districts throughout the state that are requiring masks. This is what I have as of today. Jefferson County, Fayette County, Scott County, Rowan County, Paris Independent, Berea Independent, and Newport Independent. Leslie County says if they're in the red, they will require a mask. Both Wolf County and Nicholas County have stated that if they're in the orange or red, that they're going to require students to wear the mask indoors. By mandate, students, regardless of what the board decides, has to wear a mask on the school bus because that is public transportation. So at this point, I'll turn over to the board for.
So none of the districts immediately surrounding us have masks.
And I've reached out and none have indicated that they're going to require masks.
And we're really waiting on what the KD and everybody else recommends, right? So it really
Yes.
doesn't.
Right.
I talked with Diane Miller today because this is such a hard thing to decide. And she said the Commissioner of Health, Stephen Stack, she had just talked with him today, and he is going to recommend masks in the schools. And she just said the Delta virus, the variant, as we all know, is so much more transmittable than the first one, the original COVID. And I'm just reading my notes that I wrote when I talked to her on the phone. She said that in a classroom, kids are 3.5 feet away. And of course, the recommendation is 6 feet. And she said today she had 25 cases. The last 2 days, 72 cases in Lincoln County. And yesterday, she saw an infant, a 4-year-old, an 8-year-old, a 12-year-old, and a teenager. So it's just across the board. It's hitting all ages. And she just said, the problem is if we say no mask, and that is, the parent's decision, there are still kids out there that's symptomatic who can still, pass this on. It's not just that one kid that the parent talks about. But she just said if she were asked today, she would say wear a mask today. But she said, the key word is safety. She said it's not, we don't want to wear masks, we don't like masks, we like masks, whatever. She said the key word is safety, and that's what we've got to think about for our kids.
Agreed. Well, as we know too, good chance that mandate may come out before our next meeting.
That's right.
Because we're not taking action on anything tonight.
So right now, it's when they're on the bus, the students and the driver are required to wear a mask.
Yes, driver, they do have a little leeway because fogging in classes, but otherwise, yes.
Because I've had some drivers that contact me, so.
And other than that, they have the option to wear the mask everywhere else.
In the classroom, yeah. That's right now.
I do want to share this number, and Ms. Griffin was nice enough to share it with me today. Our employees, about 50% of them are vaccinated. So I'll encourage, and hopefully a lot of people are watching this, please get vaccinated. That's what I said. Please get vaccinated.
Any other comments?
I personally think, and this is just my personal thought, this is the parent's choice. This, that's just my personal thoughts. But with your rights and your choice, you also comes a responsibility. You know, if we decide these kids don't have to go to school with a mask, it's the parent's responsibility to make sure you take their temperature. It's your responsibility to make sure that if they have a fever, don't give them Tylenol and ibuprofen and send them on to school. And it's your responsibility as a parent, if your child gets quarantined, to quarantine them. Not have them out and not, I'd like to give the parents as much leeway personally as I possibly can. But with that leeway and with that right comes the responsibility.
Anyone else? Okay. At this time, I would ask for a move to close session per KRS 61-810. Meeting specifically required to be conducted in private.
I'll make a motion.
Lori makes a motion. Ricky second. Vote.
Yes.
Jenna?
Yes.
Bruce? Yes. Ricky?
Yes, sir.
I vote yes also. We are going to meet in here. Yes.
Thank you so much.